Hi everyone, Bandanner here. Welcome back to the RTS Cast and Stuff channel and the open beta for Broken Arrow. Remember to hit that subscribe if you haven't already. Today we're going to take a look through the support tab of the Russian battle group. Many thanks, by the way, to all the people who've been posting in the comments and also who joined my Discord to give some advice and help with some of the Russian gear, because, as I say, I don't know it very well. So it's quite handy that people have, come along and given helpful tips in the comments as well. Because some of the units obviously don't tell you what things do. And as much as I can go and try and read the Discord, there's conflicting reports and things like that, so it's nice if other people come in and give their feedback as well. So, support tab for the Russians, pretty much the same as the Americans. We have supply vehicles, we have anti-air, and we have artillery of various types. So I'm just going to go through it in the order it's in, as we did last time. I still wish there was an option to do like AA, artillery, supply, or whatever, so you could go through them in order, but we'll just stick with the order they're in here to keep things simple. So the first unit up here is maybe something that is familiar to some people, the Tunguska. Something that's certainly been in a few movies over the years, I think, and certainly quite a few video games. Obviously, there are different versions of the Tunguska, and this is probably a slightly more modernized version, I want to say, than some of the older ones. It has two autocannons on it, one at each side for taking out aircraft. These are 30mm cannons. Once again, decent blast radius on these, so they can hit infantry, vehicles, helicopters, missiles, and aircraft, because this is radar capable, obviously. Yeah, slightly bigger blast radius than some of the 30mm, so it's going to be a little bit more scary against infantry as well if you do engage on the ground. Not a huge amount of heat penetration as usual, though. It is a heat round, there's no kinetic rounds for this one. And then you get some 9M311 missiles. I'm sure they have another name as well, but here they're just called the 9M311. 2,200 meter range, 4 at each side, 8 in total. Obviously, decent range for just a standard missile there. They only engage helicopters and aircraft though, so you can't use these against the missiles incoming. Decent blast radius and everything, and damage. I don't tend to go into too much detail on the damage in these videos, because I think by release they'll have jiggled all this around, and the release of the game I'll go into damage and armor repair and all of that stuff in more detail. I worry they're going to change it, so I don't want to go into it all now. So, there are some upgrade options. First is making it the Tunguska M1, which keeps the same gun, nothing changes there, but we do get an upgrade to the missile. It becomes the 1M. It's the M1, and that becomes the 1M. Now, is one of those wrong way round? Or is that deliberate? I'm honestly not sure. Anyhow, this increases the range to 2,400 meters. Still only attacks helicopters and aircraft, though. Still get 8 of them. Not too much of a change otherwise, but obviously the increased range is always nice. And then you can upgrade this to become the Panzer S1. Now, there's in real life there's various variations of this. I think it's more about the missile than it is anything else. So it still has the same 2 guns, no change there. However, it changes to the 57EH6E missile. I think it's just called the Panzer missile or Panzer system. Again, I'm probably pronouncing that wrong, so sorry. But 2,600 meter range, so a big increase in range and better penetration for the heat on this. Not that I suppose you're worrying about it too much, but the big difference is this can now engage missiles. So this can hit choppers, aircraft, and missiles. So I assume it takes advantage of the radar as well here. So something to bear in mind, that is a reasonable upgrade, but it does make this a very expensive unit. 275 points. I don't tend to bring it a lot because I think it's quite expensive for what it does. But I know some people might like it. But obviously, again, fun game, build your own deck. Do what you want to do. Next up, we have the Vina. It's a mortar, 120mm self-propelled mortar on tracks. It has quite a big looking turret, doesn't it? The nice thing about this one is, so we'll get to the other upgrades in a minute. You've got your HE blasts, obviously, your HE rounds, which has a decent blast radius. That's a 120mm mortar. You've got the smoke rounds as well. But down here, you've also got heat rounds. So it gets 9 heat rounds, direct shot, which can fire against infantry and vehicles. 600mm heat penetration, not amazing, but decent blast radius. So it can attack ground targets as well. So it's just a nice little bonus there. So, I mean, it looks like a little tank, doesn't it? So it can sort of fulfill that role, but it's mainly aiming to be a mortar. You also get a PKT on there as well. So a little machine gun on the top. Not a huge amount of armor, but not horrendous. Certainly more than some units. So this thing has high explosive rounds, or you can switch it to HE wrap. And the HE wrap... Oh, this changes a few things, look. It doesn't change the cannon, but it changes what you get. So you get HE wrap, which has a 50 blast radius, 60 penetration. And what was the last one? 50 and 60. What's the difference then? Is it range? Yeah. Oh, 2,400. 2,100. Okay, so much bigger range. Yeah. So this is just... Well, I say much bigger. It's got a bigger range. So the HE wrap gets a better range. You still get your smokes. But you also get, instead of those direct fire munitions, you get some laser guided mortar shells. So they look they're basically the same as the HE wrap ones, same range and everything, but they're laser guided and you get 9 of those instead. So there's your big difference there. You still get the PKT. Interesting though. So you're paying 20 points for a bit better range on the HE. Same range on the smoke though. And you get those laser guided ones. So I guess it depends how you're planning to use this. I admittedly don't I think do I have this in one deck? I don't go out of my way to buy mortars that often, to be fair. They're not bad though. Don't underestimate them. They're pretty good at clearing buildings. Then we have this one. Okay. Are you ready for a laugh? So I'm going to try and pronounce this. The 2S35 Kolitsia? Or Kolitsia? Or Kolitsia without pronouncing the T? I have no idea. I always struggle with Russian words that have a T in them because it's pronounced. I'm sure it ends up being pronounced slightly differently to how it would in English. Anyhow, so this is 152mm artillery launcher. I mean, it's standard tube artillery. There's nothing fancy about it. So 152mm HE rounds. 90 blast radius, 75mm heat penetration, nothing too exciting, but decent blast radius on it. Range is 4,200, and then down here we get smoke again, 4,200. So it's got a decent range on this one. Also comes with a cord HMG, which I assume is, yeah, it's on top there. You can just see it at the top of the vehicle. And then we do get a weapons package upgrade. So we can either have high explosive rounds, which are those ones at the top, obviously. Sorry, I realise that I'm well away with it here. I need to have it selected. So we've got the HE rounds there. Then we got the cluster rounds. So cluster, as you already know, if you've seen the other videos, cluster is based on a munition that splits open above its target and drops loads of little munitions, either on parachutes or just freeform that drop down on the target area. So it guarantees top attack on vehicles, and that's just symbolizing what it does, obviously. It goes over an area, pops open, and then drops the shells everywhere. Or drops its sub-munitions. They are officially called sub-munitions, I believe. Again, same range, 4,200 meters, and you just get your smoke again there. Or you can have an upgrade to extended range. So the extended range gives you this HE wrap again. So we're seeing that on both the mortars and this. I assume that relates to its extended range. 4,500 meter range, so an extra 300 meters. Same stats otherwise. The smoke, however... Oh, the smoke in this case does get an improvement, look. Ooh. So on the mortars, the smoke was still the original, but here you do get an increase to the 4,500 meter range. And then you also get some laser-guided shells as an option. So the laser-guided shells, 12 of them, same range, but obviously if you can laser-guide them in, they will be precision munitions. Nothing else to write home about here. I mean, it depends how you're going to use them when it comes to artillery shells. High explosive is nice and cheap. But in the grand scheme of things, I feel like if you're going to take the high explosive, you might as well take the extended range. I don't know if anyone would disagree with that. Do let me know in the comments if you had more experience with it. But you might as well have the extra range if you're going to bring the HE one anyway. And like, I know you get a few more shells there, but you do at least get the option here of laser guided. And then the cluster rounds, if you're bringing in cluster, fine, that is your choice. That's the only choice. The extended range ones don't do that. But there you go. Next little vehicle is the Drock, which is basically the Humvee that we've seen earlier in the deck, to be honest. Except it's got a mortar on top. So it's got a PKT on the front there, and then it's got a mortar on the back. Just an 82mm mortar, nothing too fancy. Decent blast radius, obviously. Range is only 1800 meters. So good for harassment, rushing in and out. Obviously it's going to be quite fast. You can either have mostly HE or mostly smoke. It just changes out the shells you get. Nothing else to mention about that one, to be honest. I guess if you're wanting something fast response that you don't mind getting quite close to the front line, maybe if it's going to be covered in trees or, you know, behind some buildings, then I think that's a good way to go. But I don't, as I say, I don't use mortars a lot in the game. Next up is the Nona. This one I have brought just because I know the Nona from other games. Looks a bit like a tank. It is a mortar, or a self-propelled mortar. So you can drive around the map. 120mm again, the same as the Vina up there. Standard, comes with 2,100 meter range rounds, HE and smoke, as we've already seen. Then we can upgrade that to the Nona SM, which gives it the HE wrap and gives it that increase in range again. And also 6 direct munitions. So the difference here, I guess, between these two is the Vina comes with some direct attack munitions if you don't upgrade it, whereas if you upgrade it, it's pretty much the same as the Nona. I think you get slightly less of those direct attack ones for the Nona, but obviously the Nona is cheaper. There's less in terms of its ammunition, but it's cheaper. And also it is paradroppable, which I don't believe the Vina is. No. So you'll notice so far in here, everything is not paradroppable, but the Nona can be paradropped behind enemy lines. Not sure how often you would paradrop a Nona in, to be fair, in a standard multiplayer game, but I could certainly see it being useful in single player and stuff. Next up, first piece of rocket artillery, the Grad. Again, I mean, this is pretty classic, right? It's in, you know, you'll see it in the news, in movies, in TV. It's very standard fare across the world, to be honest. 122mm rockets this fires. They're not guided. They just, you know, hit an area. So these things have a good blast radius, 90 and 75mm heat penetration. So, you know, they will damage an area. You can upgrade them to cluster variant. So again, we're talking about that top-down attack where they fire those bomblets or submunitions and drop them over an area. And obviously, again, just showing you that cluster type. So reasonably effective, obviously decent heat penetration on those. And then the other option you get here are incendiary rockets. Now, incendiary rockets are a bit of a funny one. So it's basically napalm, which is symbolized by the flame symbol here, which does damage over time. And my understanding is, from what other people have kindly informed in the comments and stuff, these have about 4 ticks. So they do damage 4 times effectively. And the thing about napalm, which I haven't gone into a lot of detail about, it's not a huge amount of damage by itself, the napalm. However, it does criticals. Criticals in the game are getting into a bit more complex stuff in terms of the mechanics and things, but criticals mean, like, you know when you've got a unit and a weird little symbol comes up next to it? It could mean that the tracks are broken, that the engine's died, things like that. So the criticals have effects like that. So the napalm in the game has more of a chance to cause a critical effect. So that is why they are good. Obviously, they should be effective against infantry, but they're probably not going to be quite as effective against vehicles other than they cause those criticals. Cluster should do more damage to vehicles. Should. But that's why the napalm is helpful, and especially when you get some of the MLRS systems like the American one that does cluster and napalm at the same time. Obviously that is like a double dose because you're doing the damage and you're doing the additional damage over time with those criticals. So they can be quite devastating. I'm mentioning it here just because this is sort of the first unit that is dedicated to doing flame damage, but it's sort of one of these things that once the game's released, I would want to cover in its own video to talk about damage types in more detail, but I want them to settle on what they're doing with everything first. So that's the Grad. Not massive missiles or rockets, but effective for what it needs to be. Next up we have the Buck. Again, probably a fairly standard anti-air piece. This one is radar, obviously. You can turn the radar on and off. As standard, it has a 3,000 meter range, but you can upgrade this. So we can upgrade it to the Buck M3, get 6 missiles in total then, and its range goes to 3,200 meters. So not a huge increase in range, but certainly somewhat of an increase, and obviously it gets more missiles. The blast radius on the M2 missiles is actually quite a bit bigger. 132, and that's only 52. That's quite interesting. I've never actually noticed that before. Well, the blast radius does decrease when you upgrade to the Buck M3 for the extra price. Interesting. I wonder how much difference that makes, because obviously the idea behind these missiles is they explode next to the target and do damage that way, rather than necessarily hitting directly. I'm assuming if it's modeled that way, then having a bigger blast radius is technically better in the air, because then it's going to, even if it slightly misses its target, it's going to have more chance of hitting, assuming that's modeled correctly in game. If anyone knows if it's modeled correctly, let me know. I obviously cannot confirm or deny. The problem is that I find with a lot of this stuff is I can't test it. Because when I join a game, and I'm obviously playing the game, if I decide that I'm not going to play the game and just test stuff, I'm kind of screwing my teammates over. And I feel bad about that. That's why I like to be able to mess around in single player against AI or 1v1 versus someone that I know, so we can test stuff out. And I can't do that in this game at the minute. Anyhow, moving on from the Buck. I like the Buck, by the way. I think it's a good unit. This is the Deria. I'm trying. Can you see? I'm attempting to do a little bit of an accent when I say it. I apologize. It's not deliberate. It's just coming out that way. This is a unit that I haven't really called in very much, but can I just say that it is really, really scary. I've lost a few units to it, and ground units as well as air. Not to be underestimated at all. So there's a few 57mm cannons in the game, and as someone quite rightly pointed out, this one, for example, has a quote-unquote long 57mm cannon. So it's an auto cannon, 57mm. It has quite high penetration. So although it's technically an anti-air unit, it has 20 rather effective kinetic shells for hitting vehicles on the ground. So don't underestimate this. It's actually quite scary. I've seen it rip a few of my vehicles apart. that when I just wasn't expecting it to be there. It also gets the 57mm HE or heat rounds as well. 120mm pen, nothing too exciting, but decent blast radius of 16. Obviously can fire at everything, including missiles. Not paradroppable, but it does have radar. So it's actually quite a decent weapon. Definitely don't underestimate that. And don't go into it with vehicles thinking that it's going to be an easy cleanup because it's an AA piece. It really isn't. You can also upgrade this to be the Sosna instead, which makes it 200 points. 2,400 meter range, 18 missiles. Magazine size says 12. It is 12. It does have 18 missiles though, apparently. Can fire at everything, including missiles, but weirdly it doesn't have a radar symbol. I think there is a case that they need to add. I was discussing this on Discord earlier. They could really do with adding like a special case up here, like under reload time, add special notes that says like if something ripple fires, as in fires more than one missile at a time, etc, etc, etc. Just like if there's a special thing for that unit or that weapon that you've switched it to, it would be nice if it just said it what it was. Because it's one of the frustrating things about the Eugen games, like Warno and Wargame and everything like that, is that their unit cards are terrible for not giving you all the correct information. Like there is so much hidden stuff. And I just really hope that, you know, Felix has had that experience of working for that company. I hope that they look at the cards and go, that unit will have this special thing that we're not mentioning anywhere else. Let's stick a little note on for it. That would be lovely if you could do that. Because it would really help me, and it would really help everybody else as well. But there you go. Okay. On to some easier stuff now. You got the Camas, which is paradroppable. It is a Camas VDV specifically. So you can paradrop this in behind enemy lines. There's not really much to say about it. It can either hold 12 people or supply. This is the advantage in this deck over the American deck that you currently have, which is that the American deck, the supply vehicles only bring supply, where here they can have both. So you can actually utilize these to bring in like ground forces as well. And the same goes for the big Camas 6560 as well. 15,000 supply, 28 people. I mean, it's really handy to just have something else you can call in that's reasonably priced to bring infantry in. This one can be upgraded in its armor. It just upgrades the front armor. You'll notice it kind of covers up all of the bits of the engine and stuff at the back there, which is a reasonable increase. And as someone very rightly pointed out, the advantage to doing these armor upgrades, and I don't really say it, and it's very true, it makes them less susceptible to things like grenade launchers and heavy machine guns. Though generally I don't get them near enemy weapons myself. That's why I tend not to up armor these things. Next up is the Strela 10MN. This is a great unit. I love this unit. It is, I think it's in all my decks now. For something to get up to the front lines that is just really effective against helicopters, this thing is great. And it's so good, people usually try and artillery it as soon as it fires. That's how effective I found it. People try and destroy it. I tend to let it fire and kill something and then I move it. As long as I'm in the area to see it, I'll move it, because people do not like these things. They obviously are very, very effective against helicopters. They can fire at aircraft as well, but they're a little bit slower. But very, very effective, I find, against helicopters. I really like having these up at the front lines. 2,200 meter range isn't bad. It is also paradroppable, so you know you'll see people drop these in early game, or you know if they're trying to get around the back or the side just to protect their other forces. Not to be underestimated in any way, shape, or form. You can upgrade it. So the standard comes with the PKP, which is just a machine gun. I'll click on it just so we have that in a record, and then you get the Strela 10MN, which you can see all the stats there. Blast radius isn't huge. Obviously you can only attack helicopters and aircraft. You can upgrade that to the Lushnik E. Lushnik E? It's got the Igla S then. Only 2,000 meter range there. Obviously, it's got 4 at each side, so 8 in total, 16 missiles, 8 in a magazine size. I believe, from what Woe said earlier on my Discord, the upgrade there with the Lushnik E does ripple fire, so that's the difference. It fires off multiple missiles at a time. And I thought that might be the case. It's hard to tell, but sometimes if you look at the magazine size and things like that, you can kind of guess what might do it, but you can't confirm it that way. But there you go. If you upgrade it, you get ripple fire, so it fires off more than one missile at a time. And then the last upgrade there is the Sosna again. 2,400 meter range, can obviously then hit everything including missiles, but again doesn't get the radar thing, so I suspect that maybe this just doesn't need radar to be able to hit missiles, which is quite nice actually. Next up is the S300 V4, so this is your big bad boy anti-air piece. Obviously radar, very advantageous here. The standard missiles, you get 4 of them, and they have a range of up to 3,800 meters. Obviously big blast radius and stuff. You can change these to giant missiles. So you only get 2, but these have a bigger blast radius, and the range is 4,500 meters. So it's a big range increase for those. So I generally, if I'm bringing them in, do bring in the giant missiles. It's actually more expensive for the Gladiator missiles. Obviously, it's nice to have 4 missiles on there, but I can cut the cost to 130 and I get the extended range, and it might be silly, but I kind of just bring these in for the extra range because there's other anti-air here that is effective in the mid-range section, like the Buck and the Tor, whereas this one is your like really beefy, keep it at the back, but you have to be careful because they're very easily taken out by the seed missiles. But I do like the S300. Then you got the Tor. The Tor is a weird anti-air system. It fires its missiles up into the air, like straight up rather than at an angle. Something quite unusual. It is radar. Standard missile is the 9M331. 2,000 meter range, can engage helicopters, missiles and aircraft. Obviously the range isn't amazing on it, which is the only shame. But we can change his weapon there to have 16 missiles instead of the 8. There isn't any difference. Oh, there is a slight difference. So the missile is technically an upgrade. You get the M2 variant, so you get 2,200 meter range. So that's quite nice. Now, the Tor fires very quickly. So this is something to mention, I guess. The Tor fires its missiles very quickly, and therefore will run out of supply very quickly. So although it has a lot of missiles, it will also whiff them off very, very quickly. So just something to bear in mind. But some people really, really like these. I've seen them used a lot by other players. I think I've brought them in once, but I have seen them used a lot. And then finally, the Burritino, or the Spicy Burrito, if you are so inclined. So, the TOS-1 system, again, you might have seen this in the news and things like that. This fires thermobaric rounds, obviously in the game, because it's a video game at the end of the day. It is treated as a heat round. So, it's a heat round with a very big blast radius, 120. Damage is pretty high. It counts as top-down attack on vehicles. Not a huge amount of penetration, obviously, but the idea is it just does a lot of damage over an area. And they are pretty scary. They fire pretty fast. Quite short range, though, obviously. Only 1,500 meters. So you're actually sort of getting into tank range. So you have to fire them from behind buildings, but not too close to the buildings, or they will hit the building. And the same like from forests and stuff like that. They can be extremely effective, and what you'll see most people do is, other than the fact you can also upgrade the armor, and I should say, this is technically a tank chassis. I can't remember off the top of my head which tank, But it is technically a tank chassis. As you'll see, it's got quite heavy base armor, and you can upgrade it to the Contact 5, which just puts some plates around it and stuff. What most people do is upgrade this to the TOS 1A. So the TOS 1A is basically an upgraded version. The difference being that you get less missiles. See, the TOS 1 you get 30, with this you get 24. But your range goes up to 2,400 meters. And it's the range that really makes the difference here. Don't underestimate that range. It is really, really useful. Being able to fire from a little bit further away. Or in this case, almost another 1,000 meters away. It's a huge difference. So you'll tend to see most people take it with this upgrade. It does cost a lot, but the range is very nice. Because it just means you're keeping further away from the enemy. Because I'll put it this way, if I see you bringing one of these close to me when you've got the lower weapons option on it at just 1,500 meters, I'm going to charge you with my tanks. I'm going to go for the kill. And chances are I'm going to kill that. And probably not lose a tank because I'll be able to smoke off. Whereas this is going to die pretty quickly to a couple of tanks. Even if you smoke it, you're probably going to die before you get the smoke off. Unless you see it coming. So I think on this occasion, if you're bringing in the TOS 1, it's actually worth doing the upgrade. And also, if you do the upgrade for that bit, you don't need the armor upgrade because it's going to be far enough away that it's not quite as scary to go up against tanks and stuff because you're not going to be within range. But yeah, very, very strong unit. Does a lot of damage to the area it hits. Never underestimate this thing. Quite scary. There are a lot of good units in here. A lot of anti-air. As I say, my big takeaway from this is do not underestimate this unit. The Deria. Deria? I'm still pronouncing it. It's something like that. The thing with the big 57mm cannon on it. Do not underestimate it. It is pretty scary. Everything else is pretty standard. You know what to expect, but this thing always surprises me. Thanks for watching, everyone. Please do like, share, subscribe. I'll see you all soon for the next couple of tabs.